Welcome to the Business Spotlight. I'm Rick Plasko, certified business and leadership coach here in Columbus, Ohio. Today, I've got as my guest Joe Emison. He is the owner of Branch Insurance. It's a old industry, but he's got a new twist on it, and I really think you're going to enjoy talking with him today. As we go through today's interview, we're looking at what's Joe's challenges, best practices, and give you a little peek into what's really like to build and operate a business. If this is your first time on the channel, please be sure to subscribe and like so that you can get notifications for future conversations. So, Joe, welcome and thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, let's get started with give us a little background of who Joe is and what branch insurance is.
Sure. I grew up in North Carolina, good academically, and always wanted to be a lawyer. But I found when I was 14 years old that you can't just walk into a law firm and work for them in any meaningful capacity, although I tried. And at that time, the consumer internet was coming to be a thing, and I realized that at that time, it was a true meritocracy. Didn't matter, how old you were, if you were a dog, or whatever. If you were good, you could get paid and work and be treated and given an enormous amount of responsibility. There wasn't really any gatekeeping. So I started software development for money when I was 14 years old. I started as a solo entrepreneur, really. I mean, not necessarily a term that existed at that time. But I built a bunch of software. I sold it. As the internet came up, I built things on the internet. I built games. I built the first software to make the iPod work with Windows. And on that journey, I learned what it took to start a business, and what it took to start a business with other people and to grow a business. And I learned lots of things not to do. And certainly learned a lot through experience as opposed to being in a classroom. Although I did go to college, I graduated from college. I actually still thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I went to law school. I got a law degree, but ultimately decided that the thing that I was the best at and that I wanted to do the most was to build companies, especially as a technical co-founder in companies that could benefit from technology, which I think today a very large percentage of companies or new companies or at least larger ventures leverage technology as part of their key growth strategies. And so I've had the opportunity to build six different businesses in different industries over the past 30 years. And it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Now tell us a little bit about Branch Insurance, your latest endeavor.
Sure. Branch is an insurance company, so holds risk, not just an agency, that sells home, auto, renters, condo, umbrella insurance, or what is called personal lines, property and casualty insurance. And we currently sell in around 25 different states in the US. And the thing that makes us very different is that there's quite a few things, but some of the things that are more visible is that we make it easier to buy bundles of insurance than anybody else out there. So typically, even if you're just going to go to one insurer that can sell you all the different types of insurance you want, home, renters, secondary home, auto, motorcycle, boat, all of these policies, it'll take weeks, hours of data entry and back and forth, and weeks, and that might just be to get like one solid price on the whole set of things you want to insure. And so Branch is built to make it really, really easy to buy a bundle and move that bundle. Although you can just buy just a home policy or just an auto policy from Branch. And so Branch pioneered and is still the only insurer where you can provide your name and address, and that's the only information you usually have to give. And we'll give you a full purchasable price: home, auto, renter, condo, umbrella. And in addition, we also make it very easy to kind of close that transaction. So even if you do spend hours with another insurer giving them all this information, a lot of times you can't actually get that policy bound and all the documents and all that done you got to spend a couple more days or a couple more weeks and a lot more emails back and forth. But with Branch, we have had people go from nothing to a bound home auto umbrella bundle with their login to the website and their app in about a minute. And that's not
Wow.
common because most people would like to talk about their coverage and get some counseling. But the benefit there, and Branch sells through agents, is that because we're not having people ask, a million questions about the characteristics of your home or a million questions about the drivers in your household, that conversation you can have with the agent is a coverage counseling conversation. And you can say, like, how much liability insurance do I need? And what limits make sense for me? And that can be the focus of the conversation.
Wow. Wow. That's a different way of approaching and almost, I like to say, one-stop shopping, making it easy for people like me to buy. So, Joe, let's set the stage for the viewers here. Tell us a little bit about what your current role is with this business.
Sure, I'm the co-founder and chief technology officer, and so a lot of my focus all throughout is to make sure that the technology is working correctly and that we're leveraging technology effectively. Um, Interestingly, right now, a lot of my focus is taking the ways that we have been running our technology organization. So that's like data and reporting, it's software development, it's, just deploying, like, say, software as a service to people and helping the rest of the organization use some of the same practices that we use in those departments. So I'll give you an example. We have complete transparency on what everybody in the software development organization is doing, what everyone in the data engineering department is doing, and building reports. So if anyone in the company wanted to know who's working on what, there's a system, everyone's got access to it, you can look at it. If someone says, what did this person do last week, what did this department do last month, what did they do last year, what are their KPIs, how are they tracking on those? All of those are in a system that's freely available, and it's very easy to ask, why is this your KPI, and like, how do you think about that? So all of
Mhm.
that is very public and available, and there's a complete audit log on everything. So it means if someone in another department, which is very common, right? Software development isn't kind of making up its own stuff to do.
Mhm.
Everybody else is coming to the software development department saying, hey, can you build this? And so someone will say, hey, I noticed that our software right now is doing X instead of Y. I thought it did Y. I thought when I clicked this button, it was supposed to do this thing, but it's not doing this thing. Why is it doing that? When did that happen? Because I swear it was this other thing. And like, how did it come to be? And we can, in about a minute, we can go look all that up. So we can say, okay, here's what happened. This stakeholder outside of software development had this requirement. They wrote this ticket. It was vetted by these people. It went to this software developer. They made these changes. They were reviewed by these other people, and then it went live on this date. And we could say, like, yes, you're right. The behavior used to be that, but as of March 25th, 2023, it changed. Or actually the behavior has never been what you thought it was. And we can go, like, replicate the system if you want. We can go pull up and run the system as it was on any day in the past, just so you can see, like, we can, we've got that full audit history. So that's wonderful. And so the rest of the organization at Branch has been asking, how do we get that kind of thing? So for example, um, if you have a financial model and somebody says, okay, we had a financial model, we had a different financial model a year ago. When I ran it, when I looked at it, it had this value in this expense line item. And now I'm looking at the new model and it's very different and it works very differently. When did we make that change? Who made that change? Why is it functioning differently? That's not how I think about it. And right now, our finance team would say, we're not really sure. I mean, like, we just, there'll be a lot of emails. There'll probably a bunch of conversations that we don't know. We've got the old model, so you're right, but I don't actually know, like, exactly how it got to be where it is now. And so a lot of my focus in 2025 is asking this question of how do we bring that same auditability and transparency into other departments that don't work exactly like software development. Like the software development organization and software development as a whole, we have built a bunch of tools so that we just use the tools, and software developers like the tools. And then, as a natural part of the tooling, we get KPIs, we get audit logs, we get like all
Mhm.
of this transparency exists. And so, none of those software developers would ever want to change that now. They're just like, no, this is how I want to work. But it can be scary to say like, how you want a lot of transparency on what you're doing every day and a lot of auditability on everything you've done. A lot of people, you get a little nervous about that. And also they get a sense of that they immediately feel, well, I'm going to spend all my time like writing things down in an audit log and like having to go back and look at things. And that's not the goal. The goal is, how do we build a regular way of working so that that just gets created in the background? And I don't believe you can go from 0 to 1 on this. I mean, I think you have to pick your milestones and say, okay,
Mhm.
what's a way that we can get closer, that we all agree would be better, or most of us agree, all of our leaders agree would be better. And let's try it. And then let's look in 2 months and say, did we get at least that part? And if that looks good, then let's like ask about the next step.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. As you were sharing that with me, Joe, what I was envisioning in my mind was using the everyday app Waze. We use that, or Google Maps,
Yeah,
when
you
we drive. And if I do not enter my destination, I'm only getting part of the information. If I enter my destination, there's a whole lot more information that's being pushed to me, that then it becomes my job as the leader of the vehicle, if you will, to determine, how do I process that? Do I get off at this exit, like you just said, or do I go the one more mile with a potential of backup? So is that a fair vision of
I
what you just shared?
I like that. I also think the Waze analogy is interesting because it's asking you, like, hey, is there a speed
Mm-hmm.
trap here? Or can you tell us if there's a car stalled on the side of the road?
Right.
And that's asking you to put in a little more information, but you know that you're going to get the benefit of that information. And so, yeah, I absolutely agree. And then there's also a sense of
Okay.
you're sharing data with Waze, right? So if you're speeding, you're telling Waze you're speeding. Probably that could be like subpoenaed by like, a law enforcement authority if you got into some sort of accident. It could be used against you, right?
Don't ruin Ways for me, Joe. Don't ruin Ways.
I'm just, there's a level at which um interacting in these data sharing systems and acting transparently, I think makes everybody work better. It makes everybody accountable. I think accountability is good. I think in the end, people who don't want accountability and who shirk accountability are not high performers in my experience. Or they might be high performers, but they're not the type of people who work well with teams. You can't have a high functioning organization with a lot of people working together in this sort of social organization if people aren't going to be accountable for what they need to do. And ultimately, I think transparency breeds just a wonderful natural accountability.
Absolutely. When we look at, I can't remember which football coach said this, but I remember hearing it in an interview very clearly. He said, average players just want to be left alone. Above average players want to be coached, and superior players want to be told the truth about their abilities and the full
Yeah.
potential of what they could grow into. I can see that. As you take your leadership role, Joe, how would you break down percentage wise your role in the business, in the technology, versus your role on the business in strategy, planning, and where you want to be this time in 2026?
Yeah, I mean, I like the question. I think it's hard for me because there are activities that I do that I think are like there's a not insignificant amount of coaching that I do that is that, well, like which one what is that, right? I mean, if I get into detail on someone's work product and I coach them on how to be more effective at that, that is not necessarily in that analogy viewed as like long-term strategic, but it is actually incredibly long-term strategic in my view.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of things I would also say I think as a leader, I think this is very true in tech at least, is I am a technical person. I came up as a technical person. And I think that I am a much better leader for being still close and connected and being able to be a technical contributor when I want to be, or if I have time to. And I think that setting an example that says this is the way we should do things, like on a couple of dimensions. If I'm able to show, hey, this work that we have a team of people planning that you're sort of all planning out that it's going to be 5 people and they're each going to spend a week on it, and I'm able to show how I can do it in 15 minutes. Like
Hmm.
I want you to think about that. Like, what does that mean? Like, I don't think I'm like unbelievably amazing versus the team. What I want to ask is like if it's possible to do it there, like why don't we have somebody thinking about that? Why don't we have some like can we do that? Because there are some things we absolutely should be spending a lot of time on. And I'm not saying everything is a 15-minute thing, but we tend to get into a way of working that's very there's like a lot of people and there's kind of slow. And like how do we do that? I also think that that's really important, showing people how to like we should work this way, not that way. Um, there's
Hmm.
there's a quote, a startup quote, which is every startup should have somebody who every day yells at everyone in the organization and says, "Why haven't we shipped anything today?" And I think that if you lose that urgency, you become the government basically. Like you ship at the speed of government, you create at the speed of government. There's like a need to have a level of impatience, and I think that's like highly strategic in organizations. But it's not going to show up because when we think about this like long-term planning, what we tend to mean when by the question you asked is as a business we have a 5-year plan. How are we making sure that we're going to achieving on the dimension in that 5-year plan?
Hmm.
But I view such a critical part of my job as a founder and as a technical person is, are we executing as an organization at the level of speed and urgency that we should be able to, that top organizations do? I would point to like Meta, right, formerly Facebook, that built Threads, a Twitter clone, in like with like 20 people in like 60 days or something. I mean,
Hmm.
that's the kind of executional like excellence that is possible. It's possible anywhere, but not without like someone who is holding the organization accountable to that. So I think so if I'm going to break down my time, then I probably only spend 15% of my time on the things that would be like traditional long-term strategy. Are we on pace for a
Hmm.
5-year plan? Where are we? Um, Largely because the departments that I oversee are service organizations. The departments I oversee
Hmm.
have to like do things in response to requests. And I don't believe in roadmaps for those organizations. I don't think if we have a 1-year roadmap for the software development organization, all I'm telling you is if you come up with something new and important to the business, you're gonna have to wait a year because I got a roadmap. Or we got to hire more people. I don't know what but it's not going to work out well. I would much
Right.
prefer to spend my time making sure I've got service organizations that if you're like, if we did this now, as soon as we do this will make a huge impact to our business because we just found this partner and they'll let us do this if we go this quickly. That's what I want to be able to do quickly. But if I want to do that, I actually have to spend a lot of time making sure that our service organizations are executing in a way that enables that a level of agility and that
Hmm.
they actually like have throughput. They have the right tools, they have the right processes, they have all of those things. And so that is like probably, you know, 35% of my time is like, are we executing in a way that will enable us to do that? And I rely upon many other executives to be saying, okay, I'm looking at our 5-year plan, I'm looking at our 1-year plan. if we're going to do this, we need to make this change over here. And then I need to make sure that my organizations can move really rapidly on that. So that's what I care about. And then I would say I spend another 50% of my time on things that are more day-to-day operational. Again,
Mhm.
because I think the distance that I get away from the service organizations that I oversee is is the day that they start slowing down. And I've just seen this, and I would say that I've started started six companies. When I leave a company, the my experience is the pace of execution and the sense of urgency, just like I do believe I am bringing like quite a significant amount of like pacing and urgency to those organizations. Um, you know, and if I were to like hire a replacement for myself and stay on board, like that would be a key criteria, is I would want to find someone who, had this sense of like, why haven't we shipped today, every day?
Joe, as you were sharing that, my vision is, um, how much are you inspiring your team? That's a rhetorical question, but as you shared that story, I heard more of you in that 50% in the business being more inspirational of this can be easier, faster. When I coach people, I like to have that 5-year plan, but I also, once we get that destination, I have my clients X off the time. It's not a matter of time. If we can get there in 5 weeks, then we're getting to the result. It's important about the result. So, as we look into the future, I want to dig down a little bit because you've shared a number of great self observations and building a great team to get to that future. I want to ask you, how would you describe your leadership style in business today?
Um, I, I'm gonna give a lecture recommendation because it's one of the better ones that it's really the only lecture I've seen given academically that I think captures uh sort of how I think about things in a practical way. There's a venture capitalist former executive named Keith Rabois, Rabois. And he gave a talk more than 10 years ago, I think now, called How to Operate. Actually, Sam Altman, currently the CEO of OpenAI, um, but at the time I think was running Y Combinator, um, ran a course at Stanford around building companies. And one of the lectures was this Keith Rabois How to Operate lecture. And it's extremely good. And he says things, for example, which is that people will say, so and so is a micromanager, or so and so is like a loose manager. And he says those are silly things. Like those, it's situational. And at Branch, actually, we run a leadership course called Branch Leadership Essentials, and we call this specific thing situational leadership, which is, you know, when I hire a new executive, even if they're going to have massive autonomy, I'm going to micromanage them a lot at the beginning because like that's important. Like, how else are we going to get on the same page with what needs to happen? Um, but over time, presumably, if things are going well, then like I become a lot more hands off and the conversations become a lot more strategic, or they're like reactive to whatever that executive brings up. But similarly, if someone who's reporting to me is like not doing well or is not achieving what I need them to do, then I have to get close again. And it might just be with respect to one thing, not everything. And
Mhm,
so
mhm,
I do think of this, that my leadership style is very situational. It's very like I'm always wanting to ask like what are we optimizing for? And then how are we that what does this particular situation need? Um
mhm,
I would say the biggest change in my personal leadership, and I think the first people that I managed, I was a very bad manager, and I prefer coaching to managing, and and all of those typical things which I've now read a lot and been taking courses, watch lectures, but the other thing that I have found very useful is there's a nonprofit called the Arbinger Institute that has they published their first book is called Leadership and Self-Deception, which I think is very good. They have a newer book which I think is a little simpler to understand called The Outward Mindset. But my experience with most leadership training is that most leadership training is like you make a bunch of people take a personality quiz, you sort everybody into like 16 categories, like you're a magician and you're a dog catcher and you're an INTJ or whatever. And then you get a book that's like if you're a magician talking to an INTJ, like here's how you have to do it. But it's so reductive and it's kind of treating everybody like a child. And the thing that's different about the Arbinger Institute's books and their courses and training and everything is that they are treating adults like adults, and they have a relatively simple set of rules that a lot of people don't, I think, understand that they don't follow, but then a lot of narrative and a lot of tools to help people be more effective at them. And they're basically asking they're basically saying if you're going to lead people or work with people, you have to be empathetic with them. And you have to like truly be empathetic with them. You can't be a sociopath. Like you have to like um and it's not empathy is not asking people about their family. Like as a well, I asked you about your family, so therefore I'm empathetic. Empathy is about like actually caring about how people feel and actually caring about their life experiences and understanding how they're approaching their work and how they're thinking and feeling. And the more you connect with people, the more empathetic you are toward everyone you're working with, the more effective everyone is going to be. And so that, when I hopefully of the people I work with and the experience that people have working with me, working under me, working, as a peer to me, is that, you know, I'm trying to figure out what are we trying to achieve? You know, how is everybody working? How's everybody thinking about how they're approaching things? And then, what do I need to bring to this situation to solve the particular situation I'm in, given those constraints?
Joe, I love the way you shared the flexibility and well, in the military, we used to call it dots. Depends on the situation. And I don't know if you're familiar, but I graduated from West Point. I lived leadership for 4 years. And even after graduating, dots, depends on the situation, comes into leadership. I was part of the airborne. So we jumped out of a perfectly good air once. And the leadership to get a 19-year-old to do that, to want to do that, is completely different than anything that I have ever found in a book. And they're not going to do that unless there's a degree of respect. And sometimes you mentioned, empathy and understanding. That drills down to respect. And then sometimes the that hopefully we don't have to use in business was the command. When we're jumping from a plane and now we have full combat load and live ammunition, I'm not going to care about how you're thinking right now. I want you to have everything done properly so that you're going to live, because I need you to cover my six. And so having a leadership style where people recognize, we say, simplify it. In the military, a leader had two different positions. They were either butt up, head down, digging a foxhole because it was nasty and we needed to get down and get protected. But as everybody else was doing that, the entire followership was looking to the leader at some point to be the guy that was head up looking to the enemy and butt down, exposing and being in danger, but doing that so that they could see the opportunity to then lead the rest of the team. Again, it's a military analogy, but it really is very similar to the day to day. You mentioned a whole lot of being able to flex instead of going to a 1 year plan. When I look at a 1 year plan, life is going to fill that 1 year plan. We may get it done in a year or in a day, but they're going to fill it for that entire time versus being flexible and focusing in on the response. I'm curious, you mentioned sub leader development. Do you have many of those up and coming leaders on your team right now?
Yeah, yeah, I would say a lot. And it's interesting. We have a wonderful chief people officer at Branch, but there is this interesting there's an interesting framework for how to think about growing leaders, I think in sort of a typical people view, which is that people are either individual contributors or they are leaders, and then they become leaders, and this is how they work as leaders. But I find in in at least in service organizations and in technical organizations that I'm a strong believer that the best leaders are former doers, and actually probably to some extent current doers. I don't think you can be a great coach for people doing individual contributor work if you don't know how to do that work well. I mean, I mean that sounds so obvious to me when I say it, but it's definitely not something that everybody believes. And
No,
so
no, 100%.
and so the other thing is when you hire and at Branch we hire a lot of younger people at the beginning of their careers. I think the majority of our software developers, Branch is the first full-time job they had as a software
Mhm.
developer. Um, and so you know that they're and you can be an individual contributor your entire career in software development. That's great. So you've got a lot of talented people who are just sort of like, I don't know, do I want to lead people? Would I enjoy that? Would that be a good thing for me to
Mhm.
do? Or or do I not want to do that? And so the you're in this golden opportunity to give people opportunities to lead, but maybe don't make them fully commit because it's kind of scary.
Mhm.
And how do you train people? It's wonderful because someone who hasn't led before, you can say to them, you can set expectations of, I want you to take these, I want you to take this course, I want you to read this book, I want you to, and then I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to see how you do things, and I'm going to give you coaching on this, and I'll help you out on this, and like you're, and it's going to take you years and years and years to be good at this, and so you should expect you do this for 2 years, there's still going to be lots of things you're doing wrong, and like and that I have in my career I have taken over so many teams where I
Mhm.
didn't set the expectation when they were hired, and I like 95% chance somebody set some expectation when they were hired, which was like, you're awesome, you're perfect, I depend on you to get this done, you can't do anything wrong, you can't admit you're wrong, like rock on, rock star. And those people are, I mean, my success rate in taking over teams with people who have been onboarded that way is terrible.
Yeah.
And I used to think it was very cruel when like a private equity firm like bought a company to make people re-interview for their jobs. I actually think it might be the kindest thing in the world you could do because
Yeah.
you have to reset expectations. People join an organization and they're often hired into really terrible expectations by bad managers and bad leaders who don't understand. Like you should never do that. You should onboard people and say, "Hey, you're here for who you are and what you know, and the fact that you want to learn and you want to get better. You've got two things. You've got your job and you've got a meta job. The meta job is how you do your job better. The meta job is very important. It's really important for you every year to look back a year and go, wow, that thing I did last year, that wasn't very good. I could do that better. That's important. And that's why we hired you. And that's why you're going to advance in this company. If you set that expectation, then you've got someone who will take feedback. But for whatever reason, at least in the sample of teams I take over, that doesn't happen. And so I have these problems. So I care when I think about leadership development, I care about how do you set the expectation? How do you give the opportunity? How do you give the training? And that gives you all this latitude to help people grow and make mistakes, and want personal improvement.
Joe, you've shared a number of resources and books that you've read that have influenced you. I'd like to share one with you. Are you familiar with the organization walkthetalk.com?
I'm not.
Write that one down,
Okay.
walkthetalk.com. They have a number of leadership books. And these books, in my opinion, take every bit of military type of leadership and push it through a thesaurus. And none of the books are anything more than 50 pages. They are all little booklets, if you will. But one of the things that you were talking about bringing in young people, and then at some point inviting them, do they want to become leaders? There's a book in walkthetalk.com called, I think it's like Peer Today, Boss Tomorrow. It is the best introduction to the mindset of what it takes to move from a doer to a manager first and then a leader after that. So it is, have a look at it,
Okay, that's
see if
great.
it fits in.
I've
It's
bookmarked
something
it.
that is very small, very simple. I'm very small, very simple type of guy. If I can get it,
That's great.
simple elegance is my theme. But again, I'd invite you to take a look at that one, see if that fits into your categories.
Great.
You know, well, hey, listen, viewers out there, we have certainly covered a lot of ground today. I love Joe's vision of where he's taking his people and the change of what he's doing inside of the industry. For those of you who are watching right now, I would highly encourage you to save this, come back to it a few times, because there's a lot of great nuggets there. As we wrap up, I'd like to move into what I call the rapid fire questions. This is just a section where what's top of your mind, Joe? Maybe one, two words. It's just 4 or 5 questions. You ready for these?
Sure.
Super. Number one, what would be the key to success for you?
Empathy.
Great. What's one piece of advice that you would give to another business owner?
You got to get your hands dirty.
And if you had to choose only one area of your business that when you wake up tomorrow morning, it would be improved, what would that area be?
Uh, I guess I wish I it would be like the public understanding of insurance. People do not understand how insurance works or what it is or how they should use it. It makes it very difficult if that's the core part of your product.
Wow. Yeah. I can understand. I can absolutely relate to that. Joe, before we get to the last question today, I'd like to ask you if someone is watching this and wants to get in touch with you about anything that you've shared today, or they have insurance needs that you might be able to fill, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Sure. My email is just joe@branch.com.
Awesome. Nice and simple. Hey, last question here. What do you find most inspiring today?
I think my children.
All right. Now you got to tell me a little bit more than I know I asked for one word. That's great. Tell me a little bit more. Could you elaborate?
Um, so I have 3 children who are a 2 15-year-olds and an 11-year-old. And I um I am really impressed by how they uh care for other people and want to be successful parts of teams and to improve themselves. Um, and there's something there's a counter narrative, at least in the world, certainly about Americans or about children, right? Which is a sort of a selfishness and like an ignorance. And I mean, my sense is that's not actually, at least it's not the human nature of my children. And so I appreciate that um, that it is very heartening to see that it is very natural for them to care and to want to improve.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm just going to go out on a limb, Joe, and say there's probably some really good parenting involved in that
Don't-
observation. And I'm just going to
We'll
give you that
we
because
can
I know
go
you're too
interview
humble
them
to
in a
take it
in
yourself.
a little bit.
Well, maybe
Well,
that's
thank
my
you.
next interview to interview
That's
the two
right.
15-year-olds. That could be fun. Oh, hey, Joe, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your journey. And thank you to the audience for watching this. If you found anything in this inspiring, again, hit the save. Come back and watch it again. I know that this has been fabulous for me just listening to the leadership and the people and the culture that Joe has created in his company. So, folks, make it a great day and bye for now.